Hello, ladies, gentlemen, and whatever else you want to call yourself. Thank you for being here. Yeah, that's right, I'm that unsubtle. Thank you for being here, and today we have Mr. Webber with us. Doku will be leading the interview. Doku, are you ready, sir?
Ready as always.
It's all yours.
All right, so first off, Mr. Weber, I want to say thank you again for taking the time out of your day to come on and talk to us. We really do appreciate it.
Certainly.
So, to start off, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
All right, so I'm Errol Weber. I'm a documentary film producer. I've been doing that pretty much my whole adult life. I immigrated from Jamaica in 2002, became a US citizen in 2012. But right before that, I finished up college and then went to shoot a bunch of documentaries in the Africas. So I did a documentary about uh, healthcare in Zimbabwe and about disability in Zimbabwe. I did a documentary about HIV awareness in Zambia, a documentary about women's health in Liberia. And then in the US, I did a documentary about, or shot a documentary about access to healthcare in rural America. Another documentary about public versus private education, film about bullying, a documentary about the school to prison pipeline, US labor movements, and a recent documentary about police community relations. And after doing so many hundreds of screenings and town halls and workshops and Q&As and conferences, well, what do you do with all of that knowledge? Do you just sit on it, or do you turn it into policy that can benefit society? So I started coming up with my own ideas to solve problems that I saw throughout society. And I thought to myself, what is the best outlet for these policy solutions? Like one of the first ones was a local level or state level policy solution of how to solve the traffic problem in Los Angeles. I was spending a lot of time in 2015 to 2017 sitting in traffic, and I'm like, how can we make this traffic problem less in Los Angeles? And that was one of the first things I thought of. Then another one was, how can we work to be more energy efficient? How can we be uh, embracing of being good stewards to our environment, which is not exclusive to the left? And I thought about different ways to explore nuclear, and there are a couple other things. How do we solve the homeless problem? And I started working with some folks in the LA area, diving into the issue as early as 2018, where I was learning more about how the homeless problem in Los Angeles was ballooning over the past few years. And what can we do to stop it from happening? Since then, homelessness has gotten a lot worse in LA, and I see there's a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse. There's a lot that needs to be done policy wise, and I thought that the best way to get my ideas forward was to run for political office. So the first time I ran for political office was for Congress in California's 37th congressional district back in 2019. And now I am running in a different district down in Orange County, California. Currently, I'm running for Congress in California's 47th congressional district, which comprises Seal Beach, Huntington Beach, Newport Beach, Laguna Beach, Costa Mesa, and Irvine. The last time I ran in a district that was very blue, I'm very, very blue. This time, the district I'm running in is an even split district, so the chances are even better down here in Orange County. And it's a great environment, and it's a bunch of pretty well run cities, if you ask me. And I'm looking forward to bringing some solutions when it comes to lowering taxes and reducing regulations for businesses in the Orange County area and California as a whole. Also making sure that we are solving our homeless problem. It's not as bad as in LA, but it is still very much a situation that needs to be solved, and quickly. We need to make sure that we are having parents retain the right and agency to choose what is best for the health and the education of their children, and to remind our government that, hey, children are not a ward of the state. So we need to take care of all of that. We need to make sure that we are doing everything in our power on the federal level to protect our Second Amendment, and remind people that, hey, the Second Amendment shall not be infringed. And if you have a problem with that, well, you need to reread the Second Amendment. We need to make sure that we're supporting our members of our military and our veterans, and recognize that members of law enforcement are not separate from the community, but are an integral part of the community. And as such, if we want to effect positive change, we need to not shun our members of law enforcement, but embrace them as one of the main sources of law and order, and also instilling a certain level of structure and order within a city. Then you have other things like protecting medical freedom. We need to make sure that people have access to the education and the information about what medical treatments are available and what alternate medical treatments are available, and leave the onus on them and their medical provider to be able to guide them as to what is best for the needs of them and their family, not to be mandated by government to do certain things related to their health or their body. There's a lot to tackle this election cycle. A lot of things are bubbling to a head. We're seeing policies on the federal level that are affecting Californians. We're seeing policies that started with Joe Biden entering office. On day one, he was shutting down pipelines and undoing many of the things that President Trump put into place. And the end result is one of the most glaring examples is right now, where I am in Costa Mesa. When I moved here, we had gas in the $3 range, and now it has eclipsed $6 for gas here in Costa Mesa. This is a huge problem, and this is a sign of many more terrible things to come if we don't change course. Because with higher gas prices and energy prices and less energy independence, we end up with higher costs for everything: transportation costs, stocking costs, warehouse costs, paying staff, buying food. Everything goes up. And then we see also that with the higher prices, are people's paychecks keeping up with the CPI? Currently, the CPI is what? 7.9% CPI. Well, that's not economically, fiscally sustainable when people aren't having increases in pay to match that. So we need to make sure that we are working to reduce the cost of production, reduce the cost of energy, so that we can get inflation under control. There's a lot to do, but I look forward to your questions.
Yeah, no, that's quite the that's a wide breadth of topics. Quite a few of which I do have questions for you. So first, before we get into it, what sets you apart from other GOP candidates?
Okay, so one of the things I have learned over the past few years is how people can make a promise to get into office, and then the nanosecond they get into office, they then either do what they're told by the people who bought them, or they will renege on their promises. And I believe that if you make a promise, stick to it. If you set a goal, go forward toward it. But it is terribly disingenuous to run on a certain set of issues and then go back on those issues the moment you get into office, because you find that they're dangling a carrot in front of your head in Congress for you to vote a certain way. And here in the Orange County area, there are a couple congressional incumbents who are disappointing their constituents because of how they choose to vote, like getting into office and then voting to ban certain guns, or getting into office and supporting measures to mandate vaccines and masking. And you ask yourself, really? After all of that we did to get you into office, this is how you repay us? There are a lot of despondent, a lot of disgruntled, a lot of disheartened people in California, and they're looking for people who remain consistent. Of course, I don't yet have a voting record in Congress, but I look forward to being that consistent voting record that shows that, hey, we can protect our America First policies, and we can uphold the rule of law throughout the United States.
All right, so you had mentioned homelessness prior. Do you have a particular policy or set of policies that you're going to use to address that issue?
Okay, so the issue of homelessness there are two parts to it that have to work hand in hand. There is the constitutional component, which cannot ever be ignored, and then there is the infrastructure component. Let me talk about the constitutional component first. And the reason I want to bring up the Constitution first is because any solution that you bring up, if it doesn't factor in the Constitution at the very beginning, there's a very high likelihood that your solution may be unconstitutional. Let's take a look at a couple different amendments. There's the First Amendment, which allows freedom of speech, press, religion, assembly, and to petition your government. Well, one of those that's important to homelessness is the freedom to peaceably assemble. We cannot infringe on a person's ability to peaceably assemble where they see fit. Now, of course, there are vagrancy laws for private property and whatnot. But aside from that, when it comes to public property, we have to be very careful about how we address the relocation of people who are homeless. Two, the Fourth Amendment right to privacy amongst yourself and your property. You can't go diving and rummaging through someone's property or tossing that property out simply because you don't like it being there. They are still protected by the Fourth Amendment right to privacy. Then there's the Fifth Amendment, and that is the equal that's actually the 14th Amendment is equal protection. The Fifth Amendment is all about making sure that we have our due process rights. And when it comes to due process, there's a certain principle that no one should be stripped of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. If you have a person who's homeless on the street, you can't just pick them up and move them to wherever you see fit. You still have to give them their day in court where they can plead their case in front of a judge and they can receive a verdict that is based on what their conduct is or their misconduct is, and then they can have the proper treatment that they need. Then the 14th Amendment is about equal protection under the law. So all Americans are equal under the law and need to be treated as equal under the law. And we cannot treat another person as the other just because they're homeless. So let's wrap that up really quickly. You can't just relocate them. You can't rummage through their personal affairs. You can't strip them of their rights to life, liberty, or property. And you cannot treat them as the other. Factoring that into account, we need to recognize that we have a court system that is currently not enforcing certain drug laws. And because of that, we end up with situations where homeless people will continue to use drugs even in front of law enforcement, knowing that they're not going to be arrested for it. They're not going to be sent for treatment for it. So if we want to get a handle on the homeless situation, we need to make sure that we're addressing the drug problem. Now, what can we do on the federal level to address that? See, if you were to distill the US Constitution into like 8 words or 6 words, then those words would be national security and leave us alone. And I believe that when it comes to national security, the federal government has an incredible role to play. And if we mess up on that, or if we are lackadaisical on it, or we underperform, it ends up negatively affecting everyone in the state and local level. Let me give you an example. Right now, we have 1,954 miles of southern border with Mexico. Some of this border is protected by a southern border wall, but the rest of it is just a barren land that can be crossed by foot or by mountain, however treacherous it is, or by water by crossing the river, the Rio Grande. Now, what can we do when it comes to addressing national security? Of course, people can fly into this country and overstay their visas. We get that. But there's also the situation of tens of thousands of people being emboldened to cross our southern border into the United States, particularly through Texas right now. And we need to make sure that on the federal level that we are sealing up our southern border, not out of a hatred for the other, but out of a love of country, a love of the people who live in our country, the citizens of our country. Now, when we create a southern border wall, of course, it is not completely perfectly impenetrable. Of course, there are people who will be able to climb over that wall. But the wall isn't meant to be perfect. It is meant to slow the traffic of border crossers down so that we have a better way of channeling would-be migrants to legal points of entry. I, as an immigrant, believe that America is better when immigrants from all over the world, they come and they bring their drive and they bring their energy, they bring their ingenuity, they bring their ideas, they bring their goals, they bring their dreams, they bring their desire to make America even better than when they arrive. All I ask is that they come to America through the appropriate legal channels. That's all we're asking. And I also very firmly believe that difficulty and or tedium with our immigration system does not ever warrant or justify criminally entering our country. That is not reason to enter the country criminally. Now, when it comes to the southern border wall, why do I bring up so much about this wall? It's not just stopping foot traffic crossing the southern border, it also works to cut down on the amount of drugs crossing our border. Back in 2019, the former ICE director Tom Homan at a press conference in DC mentioned, and this was in like August or September of 2019, he mentioned that enough fentanyl had been intercepted by their agents at the southern border to kill every man, woman, and child in the US 3 times. So imagine over the space of a year, you can intercept enough fentanyl to kill everyone in America 4 times. That is the importance of having a strong border policy and why we should double down on making sure that we are protecting our southern border. Because when we do not protect our border, those drugs cross our border into the United States and become accessible to the very homeless people who are self-destructing on our city streets. And that is one of the things that we need to do to address the homeless crisis. If there are tangential issues of drug abuse, alcoholism, and mental health problems, we need to make sure that we're also addressing the drug problem in the United States. Then there's
Oh, no, go ahead. Sorry.
Then there's the issue of actual housing in the United States. There were some charts I had. I don't have them on me right this second. But last election cycle, when I was running in the 37th Congressional District, which is right in the middle of LA, there were some housing developments that were made, 42-unit structures. One of them was a 42-unit structure where each unit cost $692,000 to build. We were giving homeless people $692,000 condos, free and clear. 42 units. So 42 sets of homeless people got $692,000 units. Currently, homeless people on the street are costing Californians roughly $100,000 per homeless person per year. When those people are housed, that number drops to about $50,000 per homeless person per year. There is a need for housing, but one of the things that I believe is irresponsible, especially with 3 years ago with Measure H and Proposition Triple H, was $1.2 billion spent to solve homelessness in the LA area. And all of that money got burned in about 6 to 9 months with no transparency and no accountability. We need accountability and transparency with our dollars spent and making sure that those dollars aren't going to wash the hands of contractors who just so happen to be relatives of the very lawmakers who are in office and making these propositions happen, or pushing for these propositions. Now, what are some other things that we need to tackle? Well, when it comes to building of dwellings for homeless, instead of trying to build new structures, I think it's time for us to look into what I call ready-mades, structures that already exist that we can repurpose for the homeless while they are seeking their treatment, and have transitional housing for them to then move on to getting gainfully employed after developing multiple skills, getting gainfully employed and moving into their own dwelling where they can begin to take charge of their life all over again. So these are some of the things that need to be addressed. I don't want to dive into the details of what these ready-made structures are right now because they're kind of proprietary to me, but I am open to discussing it further in the coming months, because diving into this solution requires like a 2-hour explanation. Because if you under-explain it, then you sound like, oh my gosh, like, oh, that sounds terrible. But if you explain it properly over the space of 2 hours and all the minutiae of how it works, then people go, oh, this works, this works, this works. This is a viable solution. Another thing I need to address when it comes to homelessness is making sure that that we are addressing the drug abuse problem and giving people the clear 18 to 24 months needed to become clean in the body and clear in the mind. You see, a lot of the drug treatment programs that exist right now for the homeless allow for people to enter and exit the program a lot easier. And as such, someone can go into the program, get clean on drugs over the space of a few weeks, but they're right back out onto the street where they have immediate access to the very drugs that got them into the situation that they're in. We need to make sure that people who are homeless and on drugs and have mental health issues have the ability to be within a space where they can seek the treatment and become clean in the body and clear in the mind over the space of 18 to 24 months. Otherwise, we're spinning our wheels. A great example of us spinning our wheels is that when I started looking into the homeless situation, the point-in-time survey in California back in 2017 had California at 59,000 homeless people. Then the number ballooned 2 years later to 66,000 homeless people. Now it's eclipsing 70,000 people just in LA County. And there's around 8,000 people in Orange County homeless. We have a lot of work to do when it comes to homelessness, and we have to recognize that there are some well-rounded programs that are needed to make this happen, where you can't just address the housing issue, you can't just address the drug issue, you can't just address the mental health issue. Really, they have to be addressed all at the same time, and all within the same kind of structure or compound or area to be able to monitor and treat these people. So that's what I have for tackling the homeless situation right now.
Gotcha. No, it's definitely a complicated issue, and it sounds like you've done a lot of looking into it, a lot of thinking about it.
It's one of the issues I spend the most time on, that and the traffic issue. But yeah.
So you had mentioned crime, and I know there's been a lot of videos circulating from whether it's blatant daylight attacks on people or these random flash mob robberies, lootings that you see going on. Yep. Is there any policy that you should put in place, or a policy that needs to be revoked that can address this? What's really become a crime wave throughout the country, not just in mostly in major cities, but throughout the country as a whole.
There are a lot of things that need to be repealed and undone. So, for example, you have Proposition 47, which came about a half a decade ago, and it allows for any crime that is about. And what's funny is I believe it was called a Safe Schools and Communities proposition or something like that. What a weird name for it. Prop 47 allows for any crime with a dollar value of less than $950 per incident per day to be given a slap on the wrist, and for it to not to be treated as a felony, but instead as a misdemeanor. So that has emboldened many people to commit further crimes, knowing that as long as the dollar amount of their crime is less than $950, nobody in law enforcement, or nary anybody in law enforcement, is going to try to pursue it. Then there is Prop 57, which allows for inmates in our state prisons in California to be able to appeal for lighter sentences and subsequently then become fast-tracked toward our county jails. Then you have AB 109. AB 109 allows for the fast track. It's for clearing out county jails. It allows for the county jails to be cleared out and have our inmates fast-tracked back out onto the street. Then you have Assembly Bill 392. Assembly Bill 392 redefines what constitutes the need for deadly force. So here we are in the state of California, where there are 600 law enforcement agencies, and the overarching programmatic development for the state of California is California Post Police Officer Standards and Training, and they're the ones who come up with the training materials and the standards for law enforcement in the state of California. I believe that we make policing and police training even better through programmatic solutions instead of legislative solutions. What the state of California is trying to do with the state assembly and state senate and Governor Newsom is that they're trying to legislate thought. They're trying to legislate how a police officer should think. Now, a couple of years ago, I think it was back in like April 2020 or 2019, there was an incident I saw on video of some Long Beach police officers chasing a suspect in the dead of night down a back alley in a housing project. And then the person they were chasing turned around, pulled out a gun, and fired at the cop. And I downloaded the video. It was a 30 frame per second video, and I went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 frames, that's 1/5 of a second. So it took 1/5 of a second for the police officer to react and respond. So the criminal they were hunting down pulled out a gun, and the cop reacted in 6 frames or 1/5 of a second. So here you have police officers who are given 1/5 of a second to react, but you want a law to go burrowing into their head to legislate how they should think about a threat at their life. This is a problem. So we need to repeal that. So I just mentioned Prop 47, creating leniency, Prop 57, creating leniency, AB 109, fast tracking people back out onto the street. You have the AB 392, redefining what constitutes the use of deadly force. And then another one, SB 54, which protects illegal aliens in the United States and makes it so that you cannot ask for a person's citizenship status in the state of California. So people who criminally enter our country are protected. So our state government is quite literally aiding and abetting in criminal activity. And the police are legislatively handcuffed. And people have recognized that they're granted leniency for any crime that they commit. And that is the situation we have in California when we need to address crime. We need to make sure we are enforcing proper laws that make sure to crack down on criminality. A quote I like to mention at most speeches I give is that it is not the severity of a punishment that deters a man from crime. It's the certainty of it. And when a person is certain that they know that they are going to get in trouble and they are going to have to pay for their crime, they're less likely to commit a crime. And right now, there are many people in California who are emboldened to commit further crime and larger crime, knowing that they will not be punished for it. So we need to change the culture and make sure that people recognize that, hey, you commit a crime, that you will be punished for it.
All right, so anytime a topic of crime comes up, it's inevitable that we're going to have to talk about gun control. So what is your stance on gun control in the Second Amendment?
A well-regulated militia, necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
So is there any law in California that you believe does infringe upon those rights that should be repealed?
Well, back in 2020, I believe it was like January 2020, there was a lot of talk about red flag laws. And there were many other states who were toying with it, like Virginia, and I think up north in Michigan. I believe that red flag laws are incredibly unconstitutional. It infringes on our Second Amendment right to bear arms. It infringes on our Fifth Amendment due process rights, because what red flag laws do is that it allows for any schmo to put in a report on their neighbor or a family member, and without the use of the court system, just have police come, law enforcement come to remove that person's gun from their possession. And that strips them of their Fifth Amendment right to due process, and that's a problem. That's a real problem. Of course, I don't believe the red flag laws got passed here in California, but we do have lots of magazine bans here in California. And then if you rewind about 60, 70, 80 years, you have the NFA, which has restrictions for different lengths of barrels for different guns that are less than 16 inches long being put on a registry. And I believe things like that are a bit of a problem, because we're recognizing that our federal lawmakers especially are weaponizing registries. So for example, right after January 6th of last year, you had the federal government reaching out to banks trying to get records of who was in Washington, D.C. at the time. And you had banks turning over bank records of people who were in Washington, D.C. on January 6th. That's just one example of our federal government weaponizing lists and weaponizing records. Do we want to have a list and a record of people who own guns in the state of California or across the United States for the federal government to then weaponize that to go reach out door to door to gun owners and strip them of their guns? Because that's what's happening next if we give an inch on the Second Amendment. And that is why we need to protect it.
Gotcha. So I'm going to shift gears on you a little bit and go over to education.
Yeah.
So the former governor of Virginia, Terry McAuliffe, had stated that he doesn't believe parents should be telling teachers what they should teach. I want to ask you, what is the relationship between the public school system, school boards, parents, and teachers?
Okay. Public school system, school boards, parents, and teachers. Woo! So I say this at speeches. I just uploaded a video about this yesterday. Our children are not a ward of the state. And that means that ultimately the responsibility for every child remains with that respective child's parents. And I believe that parents have the right to know what is being taught to their children, and that children should not be run through any form of program or initiative that the school has unless the parent has agreed to and sign off on it. Otherwise, we have state-based indoctrination that is happening in our school system, and we see it happening here. Very recently, I saw an article. Um, Very recently, I saw someone send me a post about their child in school. There was like this trans flag and some other flag going on in their classroom. We're like, wow, they're really just shoving this down our kids' throats. Even yesterday, I saw an article about a school, I believe it was in California, that had a pride parade in the halls of the school. And I believe that, and this was for young kids, like really young kids. And I'm thinking to myself, why are they shoving this agenda down our kids' throats? If we want to learn about sexuality, let the parents teach that to their kids on their own time, and or make sure that whatever guidance is being taught to children, that parents sign off on it. Now, I believe when it comes to education, we need to focus more of our attention on the math, English, history, true history, and sciences, so that we can remain competitive on the world stage.
So I know. So you touched on one issue. I know Florida's HB 1557 has caused
Mhm.
quite a bit of controversy.
Woo! Yes, it has.
So, what is your stance on HB 1557, and should more states follow suit, or should that be something different?
You know, I love that Florida takes a hardline stance to protect children, and I believe that we should embolden more governors across the country to take that hardline stand and stand up for our children and stand up for their innocence. Kids are being robbed of their innocence at a very early age, and that's unacceptable. I also believe that if we don't put our foot down now, what this compliance does with other states is that it just allows for the left to take another step and another step. And when you gave them an inch, you're just giving them a mile, and they just keep taking one more step and one more step, because all of what their agenda that they're pushing now never existed 5 years ago. But you have to remember that Democrats, they play the long game. So I'll give you an example of the long game. Board of Education was founded in the 1980s. Then you have Common Core, which was started in California and rolled out across the country. I believe it was in 2009. And then you have No Child Left Behind and all that. So you have these three big things that have been going on over the past few decades to groom children and to prepare children for a world where there's bigger and bigger government that dictates to them how they should live their life and what they should think. And I believe that it's time to give the power back to the people, give the power back to the parents for them to choose what is best for their child.
All right. Well, education is definitely a big concern when it comes to elections. But you see a lot of people saying the elections mean nothing if you can't guarantee their integrity. What is your stance on election integrity, and are there laws that should be put in place or laws that should be repealed? What's your stance on that particular issue?
Okay, when it comes to election integrity, I can tell from personal experience that there was election fraud because I saw it with my own eyes. I went to audit the election processes at the Los Angeles County Registrar's Office in Norwalk, California, right after the November elections. I personally saw signature discrepancies with the provisional ballots that they were validating, in where you look at the ballot signature and it's a squiggle, but then they cross-check it against the driver's license signature, which is a fully formed signature. And I'm just like, fully formed signature, line or squiggle. And I'm just like, is this even real? Is this even a real signature? And then there were other things that they found on records, such as people who they didn't have any place of birth written on their voter registration, or crazily enough, some people who their place of birth changed from, say, Mexico to the United States right before the election, or You have people on our voter rolls who are 212 years old. Or right now you have 208,000 people on the voter rolls in Orange County that have no place of birth. 248,000 people on our voter rolls who are possible illegal aliens. This is a big problem, and we need to clean up the voter rolls. One of the steps that we need to do is we need to hold the Secretary of State to account to make sure that they are working on cleaning up the voter rolls. And how do we do that? Well, you see, it's a three election cycle process. When a person is registered to vote and they don't vote for one election cycle, and then they don't vote for another election cycle, then they're supposed to be sent a notice in the mail saying, hey, are you still registered at this address? If they don't respond and they don't vote yet again for one additional election cycle, then they're supposed to be removed from the voter rolls. This is not happening in California. So take a look at this. The way the election system is supposed to work is that if you want to vote, you get up to vote on your own volition, and you go to a polling place and you go cast your vote. So the total number of votes that are tabulated are based on the total number of people who get up off their butt and get out and vote. Now, when you have permanent mass mail-in voting in California, the entire voter roll gets sent a ballot in the mail. Now, what ends up happening there? You see, I received 8 ballots in the mail last election cycle. At the time, I was managing a property in Hollywood, and 4 of the ballots were for people who lived on the property, and another 4 ballots were for people who hadn't lived on the property for a couple of years. And that's a problem, because while I only filled out my 1 ballot and cast my 1 ballot, what do you think about all these unscrupulous people who are emboldened to commit crime because they know that they won't get caught, and they believe, hey, let me fill out these ballots that don't belong to me? What do you think about all of these people who manage properties that are much larger than the property that I manage, and they get 30 ballots in the mail, and they fill out all 30 ballots, and they all have the same looking handwriting and signature? Or what about the people who work at convalescent homes, people who are retirement homes, people, they regularly die at retirement homes? Well, those people die and then they're not kicked off the voter rolls, but they receive a ballot in the mail because they're sending ballots for everybody represented on the voter rolls. That's a problem. And when you have unscrupulous people in places where there are lots of people who die, or lots of people who can register at the same place, like UC Irvine, where Democrats go and register their 33,000 students to that one college, irrespective of where from the country they come from, they all register all those students to that college, and that's 33,000 mostly liberal votes that they get from that school. These are big problems that need to be solved. One of the things that we need to address is making sure that we have voter ID. 2 is that we need to make sure that we are pressing the Secretary of State to clean up the voter rolls and send out the notices that are required when people don't vote for 2 election cycles, and remove people from the voter rolls if after you've sent out those notices they still haven't voted in a subsequent election cycle. We need to also make sure that on the personal level that we are going out and registering people to vote. A great opportunity is to use the current calamity that we have with the gas stations and the cost of fuel. Go out to the gas station, set up a voter registration booth, and if you don't know how to do it, go speak to your local Republican organization, your California Republican Assembly, your Republican Women Federated, your local state and county GOP. They will help you on setting up such a booth. And you can get voter registration forms from your county registrar's office. Then, other things that we need to do, we need to make sure that there are people who are working as poll watchers, and we also need people who are ready to audit after the polls close. But also, even before that, we need people who are currently looking for a job and take advantage of job openings in our county registrar's office and in the U.S. Postal Service. One of the big problems is a chain of custody problem that happens with the U.S. Postal Service when it comes to empty ballots going out and filled out ballots coming back in. We need to make sure that we have eyes and ears on the inside to see what is happening with our ballots and when they're going out and when they're being collected. We saw a video of people who work in the U.S. Postal Service who were admittedly on camera. They filmed themselves doing this, destroying Trump ballots last election cycle. We need to make sure we have people on the inside who are able to catch this stuff and report it. So when there are crimes committed, and messing with the mail is a federal crime, ready to address this immediately so that we can have our lawyers on the state level be able to address it. I want to give you a great example. Last election cycle was running in Los Angeles County. There are 16 congressional districts that overlap Los Angeles County of 10 million people. 16 congressional districts overlap. And I was one of those congressional districts. Another person, his name is Mike Garcia, Republican. He was running for what was the 25th congressional district. And right after the election, we had about 6 people every shift who were casing the joint, just casing the LA County Registrar's office in Norwalk, walking between all of the signature verification booths where they were tabulating the votes and cross-checking their work. And we were finding, on average, like personally, I was catching about 4 signature discrepancies per hour. They were counting ballots for 2.5 weeks. So 4 signature discrepancies per hour for one person, and there were 6 people casing the joint. And they were doing signature verification from 8 a.m. to, I believe it was 5 a.m. every day, round the clock. So we had people on different shifts every day, around the clock, auditing the vote counting and the signature verification at the registrar's office. We ended up sending our reports to the state party, where state party lawyers were able to contest many of these ballots. And we ended up what's called curing 600 of these ballots. Mike Garcia won his election by 300 votes. So had we not cured those 600 ballots, imagine how that seat would have looked right now. And that's the importance of being diligent. That's the importance of making sure that we're putting people in the right places to make sure that we're holding folks accountable. Woo!
Yeah, that was a very concise answer. Thank you. So I know another issue that's come up recently has been the influence that big tech, social media, the mainstream media, and large money influences from these companies moving into elections. I believe it was Virginia just recently banned what has been dubbed Zuckerbucks. And what is your stance? Yeah, you gotta love it. So, what's your stance on the influence that social media has in regards to being able to censor people or curate information, determine how many people see it, who sees it, or whether we are allowed to talk about it at all? Do you think this is a major concern? And if you do, what plan do you have in order to address this?
I remind people that tampering with an election interference is a federal crime, whether it is people from outside of our country interfering with an election, or people inside our country banning someone's social media account. If, for example, someone's social media account is used for the purpose of campaigning, shutting down that account while they're campaigning is tampering with an election, is election interference, which is a federal crime. I'll give you a great example. You ever wonder why President Trump had his Twitter account and Instagram account removed on the 7th of January? The reason is they legally could not remove his account until after the election was officially certified over. And when they certified that it was over on the morning of the 7th of January last 2021, that is when they were able to legally be able to remove his account. Now, do I believe that President Trump should have had his account removed? No. If you look at the tweets leading up to his account being removed, it was all about promoting peace. But that's another path to go down for a different stream. But I believe that we need to get social media money out of elections so that we can keep elections fair. There are a couple of things in place that are meant to keep elections fair, such as donation limits, federal donation limits of this election cycle, $2,900 per person, or $5,800 for a couple, or $5,000 for a PAC, or an unlimited amount of money in and out of the state party. I believe that we need to keep closer tabs on where certain monies come from, because you can have someone who has never donated to a campaign before, and then all of a sudden they're making max donations at the same time as other people are making max donations to the same campaign. And it begs the question, is it just one large pool of money that's split up across a bunch of people just to bypass the federal election laws when it comes to donation limits? those are some of the things that we need to look into. And we need to make sure we just have watchdogs in place for that. We need to make sure that people are elected, or people who are put into office are elected by the people who want to see them being represented by these incumbents.
Gotcha. Excellent response. I think we have time for at least one more question. So before we get into our final 5 minutes. So if you are elected to office, what's the first bill that you would propose?
Ooh, that's fun. It has to be national security. It is the reason I say national security is that election integrity is one of those things that needs to be addressed by the states, but there's a level of accountability that needs to be done on the federal level to make sure we're holding states accountable for proper elections practices. So while the Constitution says that elections are supposed to be run by the states, which it should be, there is a role for the federal government to make sure that we are holding states accountable for having proper elections practices and having transparency and accountability. That is a long-term step, but something immediate that can be done is if we have a Republican majority, we need to get that southern border wall started right back up again. Currently, the sheets of the southern border wall are just sitting right by the border, not being installed, and we need to complete the installation and complete the rest of the southern border wall as one of the many steps to help with national security. When you secure the country, you can then start spreading resources to other areas. So, for example, if you have no southern border wall, if you wanted to protect the southern border wall right now, you'd have to use human personnel to you'd have to use lots of personnel to protect the southern border. But if you have a wall that is constructed and completed and you're channeling people to legal points of entry, then you have a situation where you don't need as many agents to line the southern border wall. And now you can focus your attention on just legal points of entry while redirecting some agents towards other things like drug interdiction, finding tunnels, aerial countermeasures, and then with the Coast Guard, redirecting some resources to catching drugs, submarines, and things of that nature. So when you're not wasting money on putting personnel on the southern border, you can now be even more efficient with your federal dollars when it comes to addressing national security. When you address national security, then it begins to have a positive rippling effect on every other situation. The homelessness situation does not balloon as fast because you ever notice how a lot of the homeless people in the United States are U.S. citizens, but the people who come here illegally, they have housing and all that stuff, and they have services and schools and all of that paid for by us, the taxpayer, at a rate of about $3,300 per immigrant per year, per month, $3,300 per immigrant per month. And we can, if you look at it, you're like, wait a minute. So we're paying for people who skirt our immigration laws, and our own citizens are left destitute on the street. So we are quite literally displacing American citizens from accessing the already scarce housing and services that should be meant for American citizens. That is one of the things that we can begin to get a handle on the moment that we get into office with a strong Republican majority. The other thing is we need to start enforcing our immigration laws when it comes to starting back up with deportations. I know it's not a very pleasant thing to talk about, but it's something that we need to do when it comes to holding people accountable. The moment you don't hold people accountable and you grant mass amnesty, you're only going to embolden more people to try to cross our border into our country in the hopes that they will receive amnesty as well. So that is why we need to make sure that we are addressing the issue of deportation, but deportation does not work very efficiently if they can just recross the border back into the country. Like a person I made a Twitter post about a week and a half ago, a post about a guy who was deported 9 times and came back and was arrested for assaulting a 9-year-old girl. I believe it was a family member. And I'm just like, we deported this person 9 times. And you know how they came back? Weak border policy, weak immigration policy. And that is why from a federal standpoint, we need to make sure that national security is one of the top issues that is addressed immediately, so that we can focus our attention on other things on the state and local level and be a lot more efficient with our tax dollars.
No, that's an excellent point. I do think that's a very important issue. It'll make you popular with the people, but maybe not so popular with a certain political party. So I think that's about all the time we have. We have 10 minutes left. Is there a final thought that you'd like to address about in regards to anything we talked about?
I believe we are, like they say, a broken clock is correct twice. Joe Biden was correct. We are in a battle for the soul of this country. I don't know what battle, however misguided his battle is that he had, but our country was founded on Judeo-Christian values, and I believe that we are straying terribly. I believe the turning point for when the country started going very noticeably south was right after the Democrats decided to vote to remove God and references to God and religion from their platform. And I thought that was, wow, a whole party is going to remove God from their platform. How crazy is that? And right after they did that, the country started going down the tubes. And I believe that we need to be America first, and we need to promote America first policies. And you think to yourself, what does America first mean? Well, it means simply put, it means placing the needs of Americans first. But how do we do that? When it comes to national security, protecting Americans at all costs by having secure borders. When it comes to foreign policy, making sure that we're promoting peace through strength. When it comes to our military, making sure that the people who write a blank check up to their life to serve this country are never abandoned. When it comes to the Second Amendment, making sure that Americans always have that last guard to protect them against a tyrannical government. When it comes to medical freedom, we need to make sure that everyone retains the right and agency to choose what is best for their health. When it comes to the economy, making sure that people can lead their life and define for themselves the American dream and how they go about achieving it. And not having things like AB5 delegitimize many people when it comes to contract work, for example. It means energy independence, so that we have leverage over other countries, so that we can keep the cost of outside energy low, or keep the cost of our energy low. When it comes to addressing foster care, a lot of people don't want to talk about this. That foster care system is right now a child trafficking ring, the most organized child trafficking ring in America. And we need to make sure that there's a massive revamp of the foster care system, for example. We need to make sure that we are optimizing and diversifying how Social Security is gleaned and how it is disbursed, so that over time we can begin to transition people off of Social Security and into their own self-directed retirement plans, so that they can lead their retirement life. There are many things that we need to do on the federal level. These are a couple of the things I wanted to mention right now. And I'm looking forward to everyone's support. If you're in the Orange County area and you like what I said, well, don't just nod, and you don't just donate. You can reach out to me. Go to my campaign website. My email and phone number is on the campaign website, and you can reach out and say, hey, I want to help walk door to door. We have many tens of thousands of doors to hit over the next few weeks leading up to the primary election, and I'm looking forward to all of your support as we walk door to door and share our campaign materials to future voters. I'm looking forward to all of your support.
No, thank you very much. What is your website? Would you mind?
Well, you can find out more about me at weberforamerica.com. And there it is. Let's see. It's so bright. weberforamerica.com. And you can find out about my platform. Now, my platform is detailed on my campaign website. These are 18 different stances that I take on everything from national security to medical freedom and you can learn more about what's in my head when it comes to sustaining economic growth and protecting our Second Amendment and national security and law enforcement and all these other things when it comes to supply chain infrastructure and when it comes to protecting our environment. Lots of things that we need to do. And I'm looking forward to your support on it.
Excellent. Thank you very much for the information. We didn't even get to the geopolitics stuff. The time flew by rather quick.
Oh, sorry. Well, it's 12:55. What do you want to know?
Oh, well, we're going to have to save that one for another stream because we'll be here for at least another hour. So is there anything else you would like to share or any other place to find you, follow you on social media?
So I am starting on a podcast of sorts, a video podcast in the coming weeks. We're still putting the pieces together. We have about 90 people lined up to interview. And this podcast is realistically going to take me over a year to complete all of these interviews. It takes place in person, so there's a lot of traveling I need to do for this podcast. But look out for a lot of the new developments that I have going on when it comes to this election. If you're in the state of California and you're in Orange County, you do know that the ballots go out in the mail on May 9th, and election day is June 7th. Tuesday, June 7th. I do not recommend that you wait until the last minute to vote. You want to make sure we get your vote in as early as possible. Also, we have the problem when it comes to our elections where some people will show up to vote and then they'll find out from the poll worker that they've already voted somehow. And that is because someone has fraudulently submitted their ballot. And we need to make sure that that doesn't happen. And one of the ways to prevent that is to vote early. And there are voting locations that will open up all across the state. And you just need to go in and cast your ballot. I recommend casting it in person as opposed to trusting the U.S. Postal Service with the chain of custody problems that they have. When it comes to, what else do I want to talk about while I'm here? Because I like to talk about election integrity, and we talked about that. I like to talk about reducing taxes and regulations because we see a huge problem with that in California, where businesses are leaving California by the dozens, going to other states that are more business friendly, and we need to make sure that we are making it more pleasant for people to operate a business in the state of California. What else do we want to tackle? We have 3 minutes. Let's see. We talked about national security and foreign policy and law enforcement and Second Amendment, economic freedom. Wow, we covered a lot. Energy independence. Energy independence. Let me talk about this really quickly. A lot of people, they like to bring up the Keystone XL pipeline. And a lot of detractors like to mention, but the Keystone XL pipeline only supplies oil from Canada's oil sands down to Mexico, down to Texas for it to be shipped out through the Gulf of Mexico. And while they may be correct about that, one of the things they are neglecting is that the removal, how do I put this? A lot of what oil speculators use to determine the price of gas is dependent on America's sentiment towards energy. If your sentiment toward energy is, let us be as energy independent as possible, let us open pipelines, let us renew oil leases on federal lands, and on the state level, let's renew leases on the state level to drill for oil. What that does is that it says to the world, hey, we are putting ourselves in a position where we don't need you. So if you want to compete with us, you're going to have to lower your price. That's the beautiful thing about generating energy here in the United States on our own. When we have to depend on other countries and we start telling the world that we are shutting down our own oil supplies, what it says to other countries is that, hey, you need us. So we can raise the price of oil and you're just going to have to suck it up. And that's what we've had to do for the past year. And we're seeing prices eclipse $7 a gallon in some places, $8 a gallon. Well, yeah, how does that happen? 2 parts. Terrible policy when it comes to energy production and energy independence. And also when it comes to the state of California, taxes. We pay almost $2 in taxes, just taxes. in California. And we need to make sure that we are reducing taxes. And the state of California is not trying to do that right now. They are trying to hand out $400 checks to every Californian to keep everyone on the public dole and to perpetuate a culture of dependence. But they refuse to even temporarily reduce the amount of taxes Californians pay when it comes to gas, because they know if they reduce that tax, it's going to be really hard to raise it again, because they'll need another deceptive proposition like they did in 2018 to make it happen. Lots of things to address in Congress, national security being one of the top ones, election integrity being another one, medical freedom being another one. I'm looking forward to your support. Again, you can find out more about me at weberforamerica.com.
Thank you very much, Mr. Weber. That was, again, you were right. We covered a lot today, so there's still a lot more to talk about. Hopefully, maybe at some point in the future, we can go ahead and do a follow-up stream and get to the more geopolitical questions.
Problem.
But in the meantime, I want to say thank you again for taking the time out of your day to come on and talk to us. We really do appreciate it. And I will let Jensen go ahead and take us out of here.
Okay. First of all, thank you very much for coming on. That's very nice of you, sir. I do hope that you do win, and we can have you back on as a congratulatory conversation. I think that will be really enjoyable.
Excellent.
Now, thank you very much, Doku, for doing this discussion. It was actually very nice of you, sir. Now, everybody, make sure that if you're able to vote for this gentleman, you do so. He deserves the time. He put all this effort in, and he did not need to be here with us little people, but he was willing to. So make sure you vote for the man. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, whatever else you want to call yourself. See you next time. Bye-bye.